work from home is going to change who gets promoted. The conversation or the dialogue between whether to judge performance of employees by inputs or outputs is one that's age old. It's also one that I think the change in dynamics around work from home and remote work and people coming in and out of the office and even just the way that COVID has shifted the way people think about work is one that has changed a lot of the variables in that equation, but I don't think fundamentally changes the outcome. And at the core, you've got maybe the difference between a GTD, a getting things done methodology, and you're kind of comparing whether that's more effective or less effective than like a row methodology, which is the results only work environment. And the genesis or the core of why this recording is happening is motivated by an article that's appeared in Business Insider that really discusses or it posits that work from home is going to change the way people get promoted because it argues that it's made the process of getting results more fair, right? So without proximity and without the opportunity to buddy up with management or get close to the individuals at the top of the hierarchy, people have to get judged on performance. And it uses a couple of examples. I mean, one example, it takes an environment of coders. And it says, well, did in this month or in X month of the year, did so-and-so's line of code, did it make it easier for our customers to do Y? And and so they're basically making the decision around who gets promoted around very hard facts like that, which is fine. I think it works for some organizations. It also highlights another organization, or it highlights another CEO of an organization that basically would take employees for walks, apparently coffee walks, and have conversations as a way to build connection and build rapport. But he found that he was promoting the individuals that he liked to go for walks with, to grab a coffee with. And so, is that fair in the grand scheme of things when you think about work and things like that? And I guess how important a promotion is in the grand scheme of things. But that kind of takes us away from the difference between inputs and outputs as the variable with which you determine promotion. So at the end of the day, so you can, it's popular, of course, to promote people based on results. And that's what this article is actually saying. It's saying that because it's more fair now, that it's lazy for management to not to promote on results, because, I mean, it goes back kind of historically to times with the military and everything is merit-based. But I think that dumbs down it dumbs down what makes an organization and a company a company. And then to break it down to something we know a lot about, I mean, it really removes kind of the variables around employer brand and the employee experience. You've got a lot goes into what makes an organization great. And an organization, of course, of sales killers, for example, is fun. I'm sure it's excellent from a bottom line standpoint or even a top line standpoint. But what does that mean for what people actually care about when it comes to going to work, right? And how do you then factor in the individual who's just an excellent person to be around in the office and contributes things that make the organization run? The person who maybe sends out the monthly newsletter, or the person who is the first person into the office in the morning and makes the coffee for everybody. Like, how do you factor in those kinds of contributions on both the input and the output methodology? And so remote work, of course, has changed that. And that person or those kinds of individuals probably no longer get the visibility that they used to. But I wouldn't say that those individuals are less important in the grand scheme of things. They're just as important. It's the dynamic has changed. And so, you still have the facilitators in Zoom meetings, for example, the first person in the meeting who makes everybody laugh and removes the stress or the tension in the environment. I mean, that's not an input or an output variable. And that's hard to gauge if you're gauging promotions or raises and things like that based on that. And so the conversation is interesting, of course, and I do enjoy reading when people put out articles and studies around how best to manage, because management's definitely changed over the last 18 months. I think to become more quantitative or become more performance-based has been inevitable, because you have to determine between who's taking a nap and who's really working the entire day, and then you can definitely see that on a results basis. And for roles that aren't kind of results driven, or they don't have a results impact on the organization, very few do, but you can think of kind of support roles or things like that where input may be more important, and then kind of making sure on the management side that you're optimizing the amount of work that gets done. Those ones typically they don't get as much coverage, for example, in the way that you manage it, and they're harder to manage from a day-to-day. But management at the core has had to change to become a little bit more metric-driven. But when we think about an organization, and this kind of goes back to my original point, which is regardless of whether you choose to determine performance based on outputs or inputs, it's so important from a cultural standpoint not to forget about the individuals who, everything equal, let's say they do enough work to maintain their role, like they're not the ones that are getting singled out to get the absolutely low performing and need to be moved out of the organization or something. As long as they're not losing money for the organization, there's still a lot of value in the individuals who are the glue, the fabric, or the glue in the fabric of an organization. And it's important that as we think about how we manage remotely, if this shift is permanent, which is a conversation for another video, how do you factor in those individuals into the grand scheme of things, and in terms of raises and promotions? Because they're just as important when you think about the shift in the way people think about work today too, right? So you've got this almost macro shift away from being kind of profit driven, and this is kind of a new initiative that we're seeing away from that kind of Milton Friedman idea of being profits driven, to more stakeholder driven. So that shift from shareholder to stakeholder driven, and that's changed what people come to work for and then what they expect from work. And as that shift kind of becomes a little bit more concrete, and organizations adapt to having to be this place that maybe they weren't 5-10 years ago, in terms of what people are expecting from an organization, how do you then factor in those variables too when you're determining performance or determining who gets promoted and things? So just a bit of a thought around the shift in management, and a little bit of a kind of a rant on how important it is to think of the cultural elements when you're determining performance, because it isn't just thinking about inputs and outputs or row against GTD, or whatever methodology you feel like your work environment employs. But there's another variable there, which is the softer side, the side that doesn't get acknowledged as much, which I'm sure that if you think about your organization, if you remove all of those parts of the equation, you really do change what your organization is about fundamentally, and you really change the culture. So just something to think about as we think about managing performance going forward.